Chapter 1, May 21st, 2027, Market Square. Magic was once a thing people yearned for, dreamed of. People would pay large sums, even travel great distances, to be enthralled by a magician's sleight of hand. Not true magic, of course, just a skillful form of deception that tricked them into believing, gave them a taste of what could be. But when real magic erupted into the mundane world, that outlook changed. Now people long for the card tricks and vanishing acts and never-ending handkerchiefs, the simplicity of nimble fingers misleading the eye. And who could blame them? Because these past few years have made one thing abundantly clear. Magic isn't all it's cracked up to be. Iori Rione surveyed Hildegrand's Market Square from the roof of one of the multi-story structures that framed it, pondering which of the colorful stalls below offered the best pickings. Food stalls filled the air with scents of curry, barbecue sauce, and deep fryer fat. Other vendors carried handcrafted accessories and printed apparel. Nothing of significant value, but a pawnbroker might be interested in some of the finer jewelry pieces, and the crowd gathered for today's event would provide ample distraction. Iori crossed the rooftop, weather-worn shingles crackling under equally worn boots, and peered over the lip. Once he'd confirmed the rear alley was clear, he clicked his heels, a subtle ultrasonic vibration igniting underfoot, and jumped, landing weightlessly 4 stories down. A few months ago, such a drop would have left him quaking from the adrenaline rush, and he would have hesitated before taking the plunge. Now it was no more a challenge than walking. Hood hiked up to conceal the feline ears protruding from his tousled black hair, the matching tail tucked inside his jacket. Iori followed the stream of event-goers into the square. From the roof, the buskers' whimsical tunes had rained over the crowd's chatter. Down here, however, their voices dominated. Bubbly and tired, annoyed and content, all melding together in a dissonant racket. The square hosted a number of events throughout the year. For the winter solstice in December, a giant pine adorned in tinsel and twinkling lights would stand at its center, and viewers would flock to it by the thousands. The Starlight Festival in January, meant to usher in the new year, boasted even greater attendance. And at the height of spring, when the cherry blossoms were in bloom, it played host to a more poignant affair, Reemergence Day. Today marked the 7th anniversary of the day magic returned to the mundane world. The day a centuries-old myth became reality. It came as shadow and light and fire and frost, and in 100 other forms that manifested in the hands of children and adults alike. Empowered, they called them. Nobody could decide yet whether they were the heroes or the villains of this brave new world, sinners or saints, a gift or a curse. The way Iori saw it, they could be both and neither. Magic didn't make good people bad, nor did it make bad people good. Then there were those who walked the line somewhere in between. People like Iori, who weren't quite sure where they belonged. But in a society obsessed with black and white, gray didn't fly. Gray was unpredictable. Gray was unreliable. Gray was enigmatic. Well, this Gray just wanted to fetch a few bucks and a meal. He hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. Or was it the morning before? And his stomach ached with hunger. Soup kitchens and shelters weren't an option. Those places had eyes, cameras in every corner, guards at every door. Iori couldn't chance being caught, so instead he stole. And in order to keep his already dark shade from darkening further, he stuck by 2 simple rules. 1, never take from the poor. 2, take only what's necessary. The second rule had some leeway. Food and clothes were necessities, and money made obtaining both easier, so he allowed himself the occasional pilferage of non-vital goods to pawn off for cash. This was one of those occasions. He strolled around the market, seizing moments when vendors were busy with paying customers to pinch items from their stalls. A ring here, a gold brooch there, some collectible coins, a small but exorbitantly priced crystal. Anything that could be worth something that wouldn't create a suspicious bulge in his pockets, he took. And this place was ripe for the picking. Too crowded, too noisy, low security. He kept going until he had no room for more, then shifted his focus to the food. With his left eye, the right's line of sight obscured by an eye patch, Iori scanned the square for the most vulnerable target. Tents were too exposed. He'd be noticed immediately, and most of the larger stalls and trucks were well fortified against the 5-finger discount, except for a barbecue stand across the way, where stacks of completed orders had been left unattended on the back counter. They sat behind a row of grills, shrouded in smoke, almost as if asking to be, "Hey!" Iori turned to see a man plowing through the crowd toward him. Pierced brow, floral bandana. It was the vendor from the antiques booth he'd swiped the ring from. According to the info card on the table, the gaudy ring, currently digging into Iori's thigh, had once belonged to a member of the royal family. True or not, it probably wasn't worth whatever he decided to ask for it. The man was a swindler. Iori had watched from afar as he sized up the potential wealth of interested buyers and adjusted his prices accordingly. "Is there a problem?" asked Iori, feigning innocence even as this mountain of a man towered over him, a whole 2 heads taller and at least twice as wide, with fists like melons at the ends of muscle-bound arms. "Don't play stupid with me, boy," he warned. "Give me back my ring, or I'll—" "Do what?" Iori cut in. "Call security?" He closed the gap between them, a casual swing to his step. The man would have to bring more than his mass and ire if he wanted to faze Iori. "Go ahead, call them. I'm sure they would love to hear how you've been defrauding your customers." The man's nostrils flared, and his eyes looked about ready to pop out of their sockets, but he said nothing. His lips were pressed into such a firm line that they'd gone white at the edges. Iori considered that a win. "Let's forget this happened. You return to your booth, and I'll be on my way. Nobody gets in trouble. Sound good?" Still, the man said nothing. "Good." Iori gave him a teasing, mildly condescending pat on the chest and went to walk away. He didn't make it far before one of those melon-sized fists grabbed him by the shirt and spun him back around. Half the crowd was oblivious to the altercation, half didn't care. Some actually sped up as they passed, because God forbid anyone help a stranger. The man wrenched Iori up to meet his bug-eyed glare and said in a low, measured growl, "It doesn't belong to you." Normally, it would have been foolish for a boy of Iori's stature to oppose a man who looked like he could crush a person's skull with his bare hands. But Iori's lips curled into a grin. Very little was normal about him. "It does now." At his wordless command, an inky black tendril whipped up from below and caught the man by the arm. His brows leapt to the hem of his bandana, and he ripped his arm free with a horrified gasp, releasing Iori. Now they had the crowd's attention. Bystanders burst into panic as the ink retreated up the leg of Iori's cargo pants. Using magic unauthorized in a public space, he may as well have pointed a gun in the air and fired. No point being discreet anymore, he supposed. Defying gravity once more, he pounced onto the roof of a nearby food truck. The cooks went screaming out the rear as he cast another line of ink through the pickup window, reeling in a freshly bagged order. "Freeze!" someone hollered. Security guards swarmed the truck, stun guns fixed on Iori. Not just any stun guns either. In the wake of their reemergence came 2 technological advancements intended to combat magic, one made to suppress, the other to repel. These were equipped with the former, indicated by red cartridges in place of the standard yellow. Iori straightened, paper bag crinkling in his grip. "Can I just say 2 things?" He didn't wait for permission. "First, the guy running the antiques booth is ripping people off. Thought you should know." Since the vendor hadn't kept his end of the bargain, Iori saw no reason to keep his. "Second," he said, waggling a finger at the guard's weapons, "I bet I can outrun those probes." It took a second for them to clue in, and by then, Iori was in the air again. Probes pinged off the truck, hitched at the ends of their wires, their target already well out of reach. He sprung to the balconies of another building bordering the square. Up, 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 and then he was away, bounding effortlessly across the rooftops, the shouts from the market absorbed by the city's drone. Iori Rione may not have been the most accomplished or most notorious thief in Hildegrand, but he was certainly the slipperiest. The only authorities who'd come close to capturing him were jokers, or, as Iori had affectionately nicknamed them, the Magic Police. Sworn to protect the city from dark or ill-used magic, they were about as close to heroes as you could get, but even they couldn't get to the scene of his crimes in time. And they weren't the only ones he was running from. With a clang, Iori's boots hit the fire escape of a condemned apartment complex. The rickety contraption swayed under his weight, but held, thankfully. He wasn't confident he could stick the landing if it gave out. Magic drew its energy from that of its user, and the fumes he'd been running on were nearly spent. He clambered through a window into the remains of a penthouse. "Home sweet home," he thought, not without a note of disdain. The place had been gutted and defaced, all luxuries removed, every surface a vandal's canvas, and the reek of the mold-infested bathroom wafted up to greet him whenever he entered. Iori dropped his hood and freed his tail from the confines of his jacket. Up here, he didn't need to hide these parts of himself. Not all of them, anyway. The eye patch stayed on. Crummy conditions aside, the view alone made this apartment a contender for the top spot on his list of favorite hideouts. The southern wall was glass from floor to ceiling, large portions of which had been smashed out or spray-painted. But beyond the cracks and grime and fever-dream scrawlings lay the sea. Boundless, shining, flowing freely into the ocean. The only place Hildegrand's 100-meter-tall electric fence didn't cross. Iori settled in the window, dinner in hand, and tried to pretend the fence wasn't there, looming at the peripheries. The second development in anti-magic technology, the kind used to repel it, coursed through that fence's electrical currents. "For the safety of our people," the Queen had proclaimed, non-specifically. To the empowered, it was clear which people she meant. The fence was built to keep them in, and to stop magic from bleeding out. Society treated it like a disease, and the empowered like plague-infested dogs, despite numerous studies proving magic wasn't transmittable. Nobody knew why some had it and others didn't, nor why most empowered possessed pure magic while Iori's had been touched by the void. In fact, nobody knew much about magic at all. It was when those unknowable things and speculations invaded his thoughts that he was grateful for a distracting view, and leaving this one behind would be difficult. But to linger was to invite danger, so he would burn this image into his brain and carry it with him to the next location. Tonight, it would just be him and the blazing water at sunset, and this bag of greasy, totally unhealthy deep-fried food. He didn't care that the onion rings had gone cold, or that the grease had congealed on the chicken wings in the bottom of the bag. To a famished stray, anything that didn't come out of the trash passed for haute cuisine, and Iori was so absorbed in the meal that he almost didn't detect the shift in the atmosphere. A monotonous hum tickled the insides of his ears, raising the hairs on his neck. He paused as he went to bite into another wing. There was an undulation to the sound, like waves lapping at a shore, beckoning him out, not to sea, but to Elysian Tower. Standing proudly in the heart of the downtown core, Elysian Tower was easily the tallest structure in Hildegrand and by far the oldest. Though its outer shell had been remodeled over the course of its existence, the marble obelisk at its core predated known history. And this wasn't the first time it had hummed like that. The last was 7 years ago. Iori downed the last of his food and got to his feet. Let's see if curiosity can kill this cat.